So you're really interested in what makes those high-performing companies tick, huh?
Yeah.
Like, how do they get that incredible productivity and engagement?
It's the holy grail for a lot of organizations, isn't it?
Totally. And we were diving into some research you shared about companies returning to the office after,
Right, right.
all the changes.
Yeah.
And this article by Kevin Oakes, Why Your Return to Office Plan Won't Work Without This Critical Step, it really made me think. It's like maybe everyone's getting caught up on the where people work.
Interesting.
But this article, I don't know, it's suggesting that maybe how things work, the whole company culture thing, maybe that's actually more important.
It's interesting how we tend to focus on the logistics, right? The where, the when.
Exactly.
But it's often the how that really makes the difference. How do people feel when they walk through the door in the morning? How connected are they? How do they collaborate?
Right.
That's the heart of company culture. And as we're going to unpack, I think it's a massive driver of success.
Totally. And it's not just some fluffy feel-good thing. This article, it draws a straight line between a good, solid, healthy culture and how well a company actually does, like their bottom line. And they hit you with this stat right away, and it's kind of amazing. High-performing companies are 5 times more likely to have these really healthy cultures.
It's just 5 times.
5, it's huge. So what's the connection there? Why is that?
Well, I think that number makes you stop and think, doesn't it? I mean, it just shows how crucial a healthy culture is to a company if you want them to really succeed. Because when people feel valued, respected, when they trust the people they work with, their leaders, well, it just creates this environment where people want to work together. They want to be engaged.
Makes sense.
Communication is smoother. You don't have people stuck in their own little silos, and you get teams that are all on the same page working towards the same goals.
Yeah, so it's not just about avoiding, the negative stuff or making some kind of nice place to work. It's about getting results.
Right.
It's about creating an environment where people actually want to do their best.
Exactly.
And Oakes, he talks about some big benefits that come along with building this kind of environment.
Oh, yeah. One of the most important is productivity. When people are connected to what they're doing, when they feel supported, when they have the power to actually make decisions, they're going to go the extra mile. You're going to get their best every day. And that, of course, that's what impacts a company's bottom line.
Yeah, if people are dragging themselves to work every day, just going through the motions, I can't imagine you get that same level of, what's the word?
Dedication.
Yeah, dedication. Or even the output.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just, checking tasks off a list. Oakes also talks about engagement.
How into their work people are.
Exactly. It's how invested people are in what they're doing in the company itself. When you have a healthy culture, people aren't just there for the paycheck. They're present, they're motivated, they want to contribute.
And that kind of energy, it's got to be contagious, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does become this self-fulfilling thing. People are treated well, they treat others well. That builds trust. It makes it easier to collaborate. And then you get more creativity, better solutions, and in the end, a much more successful organization.
And it's got to make it easier to attract good people in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially these days when everyone's competing for the best talent, company culture, it can be a deal breaker.
Makes sense.
People want to work somewhere that shares their values, where they can be themselves, and where they feel like what they're doing actually matters. A good culture is a huge draw.
So we've talked about how important this whole healthy culture thing is, but Oakes, he brings up a really important point. You can't just assume you have a great culture.
Right.
You've got to know. You've got to actually measure it.
Absolutely. It's like anything else in the business world, right? You need data to make good decisions.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just throw a product out there without doing any market research. And building a company culture, it's no different. You have to know where you stand, what's working, what's not, before you can even start making changes.
Okay, so how do you measure something like culture? I mean, it's not exactly tangible. Are we talking about those employee engagement surveys companies send out?
Those are definitely part of it. Engagement surveys, they can tell you a lot about how people are feeling, if they're happy, if they're facing any obstacles. But you can't just rely on one survey a year. You need more frequent check-ins just to get a read on the current mood, the temperature of the company.
So you're constantly keeping your finger on the pulse.
Exactly. And you can't discount the importance of just talking to people.
Yeah.
Having focus groups or just sitting down one-on-one with employees, That's where you get the real stories, the things that the numbers don't always tell you.
Yeah, sometimes you need to hear it straight from the source.
Exactly. And those conversations can be eye-opening, you know? You might uncover issues you didn't even know existed, get a much better understanding of how things really work.
Makes sense. So let's say you've got all this data, numbers, stories, everything. What then? How do you actually use it to build a better workplace?
Now that's the million-dollar question, and that's what we'll dig into as we continue this deep dive.
So we're sitting on this mountain of data, all these insights into what's really going on with our company culture. But data is only useful if you actually, use it.
100%. I mean, data without action, it's just noise, right?
Yeah.
The real magic happens when you take all that information and you use it to make real change happen.
So where do we even start? If someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, my company culture could use a little TLC, what's step one?
Well, Oakes talks about this idea of a culture scorecard, like a dashboard almost.
Okay.
It's a way to visualize how healthy your culture is, track all the important stuff and see if you're actually making progress.
A culture scorecard.
Yeah.
So what kind of stuff are we measuring?
Well, it depends on what your goals are, what your company values. But some common ones are things like engagement scores, obviously, but also things like your employee net promoter score.
And that's
Yeah.
how likely are people to recommend working there?
Exactly. It's not just are they happy, but would they tell their friends to work here? And you might also want to look at things like diversity. Are there enough opportunities for professional development, work-life balance, all that stuff.
So you're painting a bigger picture of what it's actually like to work there.
Exactly. And the great thing about a scorecard is you can track all this over time. You can see, okay, are the things we're doing moving the needle or not?
Right. So it's not just a one-time thing, check the box, we're good.
No. Culture's fluid, right? It's constantly changing. You need to be paying attention, adapting your approach as you go.
And Oakes mentions this isn't just an HR project. This is everybody, right?
Building a great culture has to be a company-wide effort.
So how do you get everyone on board with that? How do you create that sense of ownership?
I think communication is key. You have to be upfront with your employees about the data you're collecting, what your goals are, how things are going.
So almost treat employees like, stakeholders in the company culture.
In a way they are, right. They're the ones experiencing it day in and day out. Get their input, ask what needs improvement, what solutions they can think of.
Make them part of the solution.
Exactly. When people feel heard, when they feel valued, that's when you really start to see a culture shift.
Yeah. Sounds like it takes a lot more than just, free snacks and a ping pong table.
It definitely takes more than that. It's about creating something meaningful, building a shared sense of purpose, making sure everyone's on the same page about what you're working toward.
And speaking of working together, Oakes' research, it also highlighted the role of leadership in all of this.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting.
So we were talking about how important leadership is in shaping a company's culture.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like, one of those chicken or the egg things.
Yeah.
Like, do strong leaders create a good culture? Or does a good culture attract those strong leaders?
It's a really good question, and it shows how leadership and culture, they're kind of a two-way street.
Yeah.
They each affect the other. Oakes' research, it actually found that companies that do really well, their boards of directors, they tend to put a big emphasis on company culture. So it's not just something they say is important. They're actually involved in making it happen, making sure it's part of the company's DNA.
So it's not enough to just send out an email. It's like, hey, everyone, culture is important.
Right. It's got to be more than talk.
Leaders actually have to walk the walk.
Exactly. People pay attention to what you do, not just what you say. When employees see their leaders genuinely trying to create a positive environment, a supportive environment, that's when they buy in. That's when you see real change.
It sounds like it takes, real effort from the top down.
Yeah.
But what about people who, they're not a manager, not a CEO? What can they do? It's easy to feel like company culture. It's this big thing you can't really influence.
I totally get that. But I actually think everyone in a company has the power to change the culture, no matter what their title is.
Really?
Yeah. It starts with just being aware of your own actions, how you treat the people you work with.
Yeah.
Are you being respectful? Are you being supportive? Are you living the values that you want to see in your company?
So it's about kind of taking care of your own little corner of the company.
Yes. And don't be afraid to speak up. If you see something that's not right, that doesn't fit with what the company says it values, say something.
Even if you're not a manager.
Especially if you're not a manager. Sometimes the people closest to the work, they have the best perspective. Talk to your manager, talk to HR. Take those surveys seriously. Make your voice heard.
Right. It's about remembering you have a stake in this too. This is your workplace.
Exactly. What you experience matters. Your perspective matters.
This has been a really great conversation. I've got a lot to think about. So, as we wrap up this deep dive on company culture, what's the one thing you really hope sticks with our listeners?
Good question. I guess it's that creating a healthy company culture, it's not a one-and-done project. It's an ongoing thing. It takes everyone working together, consciously and consistently.
And it's not about, just perks or whatever. It's about building a company where people feel valued, respected, and they have the power to do their best work.
Yes, exactly. And that's something worth striving for.
Absolutely. So as you all head back to your own workplaces, your own teams, just remember, a thriving culture, it starts with each and every one of us.
Well said.